It's there! Holy moly, this one's going to go big.
Okay, I'm pleased to be here with Degsy Degworth, aka Harry Headwound. Now, in case you don't know, Degsy runs a channel as well. If you're in any way interested in fruit machines, check it out. I'll leave a link in the description to this video. And yeah, I'm going to start off with my boring starter for 10 questions for the say, which is, hi Degsy, how's it going? And how did you first get into fruit machines?
Okay, yeah, getting into fruit machines, I was very late, because a lot of the times when you talk to people about fruit machines, they'll tell you about they remember going to the seaside with their sort of gran and granddad and playing, being lifted up to press the buttons and all that kind of thing. Never happened to me because my dad was super anti-gambling, which is quite funny considering where I ended up. But
that's worked out well.
So yeah, there's probably a lesson there. But so we went to the arcades all the time because we grew up in Manchester. You go to Blackpool and Southport all the time. Llandudno, Scarborough, so we were in amusement arcades all the time, but I was never interested in fruit machines at all. We were on the video games and the pinballs, and it wasn't until I was like, I think I would have been 17, because at the time my brother was getting pretty good at golf, and he was playing at Harwood Golf Club up in North Manchester, and me and my dad were going up there to pick him up, and I'd noticed he had like a couple of club machines in the bar area there. I think they would have been on £100 jackpot at the time. 10p play, and one day I was up there and I was collecting my brother. He's a little bit younger than me, and he was saying to me, I'll just put a little bit of money in these machines. He said, this one here, and I remember it was a bar crest. I think it was called Potluck. It was your 4-reel club machine.
Potluck, yeah, that sounds
familiar. And it's got like the 4 different features on it. You've got like the red, yellow, blue and green feature, I think. And he said, "Oh, go and just put some money in that." And I had I think it was 20p on me for a Twix or something. I thought, I'm not wasting that. I can get a Twix for 20p. He said, no, some guy was playing it and one of the features ready to go. So he taught me into putting the 20p in. And I think it was the yellow features that were golden. I think if you filled up the letters golden, you got like some wind spins. So I put this 20p in, it held him, and he said, "Oh, hold that, press start." This is literally the level I was at. I'm like 17 years old now. I basically didn't even know which buttons to press.
Right, complete noob.
Yeah, basically. It's like because my brother had watched he was too young to play the machine, but he'd been watching the other members play it, and they took a lot of money. These things got played like all the time. The members were playing them, and just as chance would have it, I got the feature. It filled up the golden, and it was like some kind of wind spins type thing, and it wasn't a fortune. It was about £12.70, but at the time I had like a paper round. So I think I was earning like £4 a week or something on a paper round, and this thing had just given me like 3 weeks' wages. And that's the first real memory I've got of properly playing a fruit machine, and it was probably the worst thing that could have possibly happened as well, because I won. If I'd have lost that 20p, I'd have probably just walked away and thought, that's stupid, what a waste of money that is. But instead I went away with a pocket full of pound coins and was very pleased with the experience.
Interesting. So you were quite a late starter compared to some other people, so to say. You actually reminded me of a story I know about. I'll not say who exactly, but they were in the casino and they had like 50p, and they just put it on 0 on roulette, and it came in, and that got them hooked for ages, and they wasted a whole lot of money on roulette. Just that one thing, and you go think, if that 0 hadn't come in, how different it could have been.
Well, I remember me dad, because I was like, oh, look all this money I've got, and me dad's like, no, don't, they're only there to make money for one person. It's not you, yeah. But the worst of it was, it just tied in, because I was like 17 at the time. So there was me and a couple of mates from college. We were just starting to tentatively go to the pub. You learn the pubs that you can get served in, when as long as you sort of behave yourself, they'll let you in and they'll serve you. So it kind of fed into, from that, we just started going to the pub. And, back in, this would have been, early 1991, something like that. It's not like it is now. There were pubs everywhere then. There were just so many pubs, and every single pub even like the little pubs would have like a couple of fruit machines. And from there, started going out to the pub and playing the fruit machines there. I mean, what was around then, I remember £4.80 jackpot, of course, came out in 1990. So when we started going to the pub in 91, everywhere was on the £4.80 jackpot on the 777 Heavens, Double Chance, that BFM one, JPM Streets Ahead. I mean, of course, obviously they're all emulated now, so you can play them again. So it was a club machine. The very first machine that I played and won out of was a club machine. I'm pretty sure it was called Potluck, and then it was into the pub. Then we were starting getting served in the pubs, and I was playing the machines in the pubs then.
Interesting. So it is a little different from a few other people's experience, so to say. So going from there, how did you end up thinking, right, possibly I can actually make some money on these rather than just relying on blind luck, if you like?
Is that
fast forwarding a bit?
Well, I mean, I didn't really to start. The problem was, and I mean, I'll be absolutely upfront about it. I just got addicted to the thing straight away because it was that initial winning quite a few quid off the club machine, and then going into the pub. I do remember the double chance that they had, like the second feature up on double chance. There was two sides you could go up the trail. There was a blue and a red, and the second feature up on the blue trail was skill cash. And I got pretty good at skill cash. Now, I have said this in some of my videos, because if you watch me doing skill caches in the emulator, I'm diabolical at it. But a younger version of me actually got pretty good at the skill cache on that, and I could hit it pretty regularly. So the first, the first couple of times I played, I was winning, and I just fluked a streak out of 777 Heaven, and they could go for about 30 quid even back then, something like that on a streak. So
that's a lot of money then.
It was. I mean, obviously a lot of it was in tokens, because then, I mean, back in your jackpots were paid in tokens, but you could spend them at the bar, you could get drinks for your mates, and they give you money, that sort of thing. So I got off to a pretty good start. Like I genuinely remember thinking to myself, I can't lose on these things. This is just easy money. It's free money. But then from there it went badly downhill, and it was then a good 10 years, I would say, of really doing very, very. I have covered this in videos on my channel. I just had 10 years basically of losing. So for all that time, from 1991 through to late 2000s, the better part of 10 years, I was honestly just a mug filling them up, and I just lost and lost and lost and lost. And when it came to, if you want me to fast forward to when I actually started to win on them, you need to go forward to the year 2000 for that. So like 9 years later. So from 1991 to 2000, I mean, obviously you didn't lose all the time, even a numpty, which I was. We knew that there were things like streaks. We knew that there were, things like holds after nudges, and maybe you could get half decent at a skill cache or a real match or something like that. But I'd be lying if I said I did anything other than just lose, basically.
So 9 years of expensive lessons, shall we say? Very,
very expensive. Me and a mate, some years ago now, we sat down, and it was very much back of a fag packet sort of calculation, but trying to work out, how much money I had access to, how much I could have spent, that kind of thing. We reckon that over those 9 years, I must have lost something in the order of 50, 60 grand, something like that, playing fruit machines. It was a pretty big number.
Yeah, I mean, and like 50 grand then is a lot more than it is now, certainly. I mean, in the 90s, it's a lot different. One thing I'll mention there, you mentioned about skill stops. I find skill stops on emulators actually much harder than in real life. I imagine age isn't helping, but the actual, I don't think that's helping either. The actual physical machine.
Yeah, there is that.
It's trickier, the way the lights go on like a screen, and like there's a lag of lights and all this kind of. It is harder, I think, on the emulator, but
yeah, I do have a hard. I mean, I make that excuse all the time. So
I
was better at this on the real machine, but
yeah, I agree.
I do find it harder. But yeah, I mean, if you want to jump forward to when I actually started thinking I could win on them, if you want me to do that, because that was in 2000, and it actually ties into the Prez, who you were interviewing just the other day there, because it was through the CMA. Because I was obviously in the early days from 1991. I mean, I first got on the internet, I think, in about 95, 96 with a dial-up modem.
56k was it? Or
Yeah, oh yeah, 28.8 I think. And then
you had a
then
28.8.
then
Well,
you got
that's
the
even further
56.
back. But I
So
think there's a 14.4 as well,
yeah,
which is really
so
Stonehenge. But
so for the first 5 years or so, it was just that there was no, the internet kind of existed, but nobody was on it really, and you had to be a proper hardcore nerd to be even on it. So,
yeah,
but from about 96 onwards, I'd say I was on the internet and I was constantly looking for stuff about fruit machines. And there wasn't much out there. And I bought some of them. Do you remember them simulator things that people were selling in the late 90s? Like, play a fruit machine on your PC and you could download the shareware and pay a tenner to register it and all that sort of thing. But some of them were okay, but none of them were like, you'd find a feature that would always repeat or something like that. None of them were real. But
yeah.
I was constantly looking for information about fruit machines. And I was on a few of the old mailing lists as well. Do you remember Usenet, the old Usenet mailing lists?
Just about, I can remember being on a few. Yeah,
Yeah, and there were some fruit like uk.rec.fruit machines or something like that, and there was some chat about the CMA mailing list on there. So I thought to myself, I don't know if it was Prez himself or somebody else was talking about it, but I became aware of the CMA, and I'd gone to the website and said, oh, you can pay I think 45 quid to join our members area. And I thought, well, I'm losing a fortune on these things anyway. For the sake of 45 quid, I might as well see if there's a little bit of information out there. But to be honest with you, I didn't really think such a thing as winning on fruit machines was possible. I just thought everyone was just the chump to fill them up, and the operator would take the money out at the end of the week. So I joined the CMA and got access to the golden pages. And I've got to be honest with you, I was a little bit disappointed because a lot of it was about club machines, which we never had on the Isle of Man. So I can't speak to how good the club machine info was, but a lot of the fruit machine stuff, it was fairly basic. Kind of, this is what the feature does, or collect this, the machine's happy if it's doing this or whatever, which even like some pretty clueless like me had worked out at that point. So that does tie into what Prez was talking about when you were talking to him the other day, which is they didn't put the top boy info on the members pages when it was brand, because you wouldn't. For the sake of 45 quid, you're not going to start putting up tips that are worth a fortune. But for the sake of it, I just wrote a guide myself to put up on the CMA, because they had do you remember Barcrest hijinks?
Yeah, I do just about. Yeah.
Started off on 10 quid and then it went up to 15 quid. And I had one in a local pub here and I was playing it quite a lot. I'd learned what all the features were doing. I'd learned to understand when it wasn't happy and all that sort of thing. So I was doing all right on it. I felt like it was a machine I could do okay on, or at least not lose my shirt. So I wrote a guide for the CMA in the style of all the other guides on there. Here's what the features do, here are the good signs and all that sort of thing. And he actually put it up. I think there's that little archive of the CMA guide that's doing the rounds at the moment. I think it's still got the guide that I wrote for hijinks on it. But then from the mailing list behind the scenes, your email addresses were public, so everyone could see your email address. And one of the guys who was on the CMA list just emailed me privately. I said, all right there, mate. I've read your guide about hijinks. He said, just ignore all that. He said, just force it. And I'd never heard that term before. I had never heard the term force it. I was like, well, what does that mean? So I just emailed him back and said, oh, cheers, mate. Thanks. I said, what do you mean force it? He said, just take the jackpot. He said, don't do anything else. He said, just gamble out the jackpot repeater or the cheese streak thing and see what happens. And I was like, oh, okay then. So next day, as soon as I got back from work, I ran off down the pub with the bags of pound coins. And for the first time ever, this would have been mid-2000, ran down to the pub and forced out this hijinks on a £15 jackpot. And if you remember what Barcrest liked to do at the time, if you forced them out, they would streak.
Yep, good chance of it.
And I stood in front of the machine thinking, this is crazy, this isn't going to work. How can you play a fruit machine just not collecting anything other than the jackpot? Cost me about, I don't know, 25 quid to force it out, and of course it streaked for 45 quid. And I thought, well, that's not too bad. Maybe it's a fluke, but around that time, there were so many pubs in my hometown at the time and so many fruit machines. And it was the time of the Forcible Barcrest. So they had like Monty Python's Flying Circus, Neptune's Treasure, Arabian Nights, that Red Hot Nights.
Shazam.
Yeah, all of them. So
the Shazammers, basically. That's the way I know. Yeah.
So just with this one piece of that was literally all I started with. And then really late in the day, we literally talk in the year 2000 here when I got what you would call my first piece of actual information. And I just went round town forcing everything. And it worked. That was the thing. So started streaking the machines around town. And I'm not even kidding. I went like overnight from pretty much consistently losing. You know, the odd win here and there, but basically I lost on fruit machines. And in a day, it flipped from losing consistently to winning consistently just with that one piece of information. Because you had impulses out there, like some of the like spin on it.
That's a good machine. I like that.
That was one that you could force out and it streaked and so on. But to give you an idea how clueless I was, I would force everything. So I was forcing like JPMs.
That could go wrong big time, yeah.
You know, and they take pity on you. Like you'd force a JPM or try and force a JPM, and it'd just spin a jackpot in the end because you were so stupid. But the point wasn't, and sort of eventually answer your question, that then told me that it was possible to win on these things, that you didn't just have to lose on them all the time.
Sure.
So even though I had that one bit of information, I then started to get information or look for information about other machines, because even just that one simple, really basic thing taught me that it was possible to win on them.
And that's your first glimpse into it. If no one else was forcing your bar quests, you'd have done quite well off them, I imagine. It's a different story if a whole load of people are chasing each other's tails, but that armed with that one bit of info, that will make you money, definitely.
It did, yeah, and I remember people, because I mean, it was very different in the pubs back then. You know, far more people played the machines. You know, the change from the round brigade was still a thing and all that type of stuff. And I remember you'd have people watching you sometimes, and you'd be like, "Oh, you've got a tenner there. Why don't you collect the tenner?" And it'd be just like, "Oh no, you try and play slightly stupid, like you say, "Oh, I just think it might give me a jackpot on this board," something like that. So yeah, that was when I started to think it was possible to win, just with that first bit of info with the forcing, and then I started to try and find it. Well, that was through the CMA. I mean, even though it wasn't the CMA directly that gave it to me, if it weren't for the CMA and it weren't for that one guy, I've often thought that 45 quid I paid to join the CMA is the best 45 quid I ever spent, because it gave me a bit of info and it gave me the knowledge that there were ways to beat fruit machines, which I'd never thought was a thing before.
That's the thing. The 45 quid, it's not really, as you say, the info you got. It's like access to other people. I'll say one thing. I actually just reminded me back then, as you say, when you're on the mailing list, your email address is there and whatnot. There was another mailing list set up with much less people, which was supposed to be for sort of higher quality info. I've forgotten what it was called. I think it was like FMI or something. And then, because people started searching for fruit machine mailing lists, and they found one. And then so eventually what happened is someone created one on mini metros. They said it was about mini metros, but it wasn't actually. It was really about fruit machines. It was just a disguise to throw anyone off searching.
Oh, right. Okay. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah, that was the secret one. But then, even then, it's like that was kind of the elite one. Even then, people would still keep things to themselves.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even if you were sharing it with like 10 people, it's still 10 more people.
Yeah.
And who knows how much quicker that's going to kill a trick.
Yeah.
But as you say, I agree that the money spent just joining the club, access to people, I mean, very, very good investment ultimately.
Yeah, it was. And it led on to that was basically from that one bit of info. I kept in touch with that one guy and slowly started to build up some other contacts as well. And from then on, got like the fact that JPM's numbered. I didn't know that. To give you an idea, in mid 2000, I didn't know about JPM's and ACE's numbering. And then
massively important.
Yeah, that was a bit of info that I got later on. Someone he did. I remember he didn't tell me directly. Like I remember saying to him, like, remember Cashbuster with the stop and step, the second feature
Yep.
up. Before I
Yep.
knew that, I was trying to force it. Can you imagine trying to force Cashbuster?
Wow.
Because you've got to gamble about 374 times.
There's an awful lot, and it'll do you on 10s and 11s all day long.
I know. So, but I remember this guy emailing me. He said, "Look, I'm not just going to tell you this. You're going to need to work it out for yourself to an extent." He said, "Just watch what the machine's doing when you're playing it," and he said, "Just maybe keep an eye on the high-low reel when you're playing it." Try and nudge me in the direction. And yeah, of course, as we all know, that it won't show 1s and 12s unless it's got a jackpot in it. Or the opposite is true. If you're not seeing those 1s or 12s, you're not going to get a jackpot out of a JPM.
Yes, that info was kept pretty quiet, or at least relatively quiet, compared to some other info for quite a while. I mean, I remember later on, every 7-year-old kid in Blackpool knew about it. Is it 1ing and 12ing, mate?
Yeah.
But I mean, for a while, that was really, really valuable. And obviously, you had the other machines, things like Impulse the Machine, not the brand, by JPM, and they would use different numbers, 3s and 8s, which stepped to 1s and 12s.
That's right. Yeah.
Same principle, and there's Red Alert, many others, 5-liner, and I think that numbered on bonuses. Is that right? Bonuses on the bonus numbers.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was I mean, the fact you could tell within £1 or £2 whether to play it or not, massive edge. Made all the difference for JPM, certainly.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, if I'd have had that one piece of information, like back in the £6, because I believe they started doing it with as early as Roller Coaster, they were doing numbering, weren't they? Which started on the £6 jackpot.
Yeah, it's a while back now.
Yeah, but I mean, I remember standing in front of like Roller Coasters, losing phenomenal amounts of money. And just not even understanding. I don't understand how a £6 jackpot machine can take this money, pumping 40, 50 quid into it maybe.
Yeah.
And just, but it'll never land on test your strength or whatever when it's not numbering. So yes, and like you say, you never need to lose more than 3 or 4 quid on a JPM after that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not going, leave it alone. If it is, most of the time you're at least breaking even, usually making profit, so or minus the cost of a drink in a pub. One thing I wanted to ask you, Isle of Man, did this help or hinder you in terms of access to machines and program updates and all this kind of thing? Did you end up with older ones there, or did people, by the time they got there, had they already updated them all? How did that work out for you?
I think on balance, I'd say it probably worked out okay, because there was certainly a lot less competition around here. Because I know, I mean, one of the earlier ones, I think, that really exploded in the UK, and I think some players will say it was like the start of the end of the game was like Pie Factories, when just everyone knew Pie Factory. And everyone was going around doing Pie Factories, and it was on the internet. Like round here, I had the Pie Factories and all the clones to myself, certainly in my hometown here. There was,
wow, that sounds awesome.
There was nobody else doing them, or if they were doing, they were taking so much money that they were still ready, because I was trying to, it's like when you feel like you've got your own little patch, you try and keep on top of it. So I was trying to get the timings right for, which pubs were getting more play. Like I'd go out midweek, or Monday evening was a favourite one, try and catch them after the weekend, that sort of thing. So machines that were kind of dead in the UK, or you had people fighting like ferrets in a sack over them, I was getting to myself over here for a decent period of time. On rechips, they were bad to a point here. We had quite a few unchipped £25 Pie Factories around here as well. And then they finally chipped them up on the £25 jackpot. But the operators here were starting to get wise around that time, sort of £15, £25 era. Like I remember we never had an unchipped King Kebab, for example.
Oh, right. That was a good one as well.
They were chipped when they got here. just the ticket. There were so many machines where I had the info. That was the really annoying thing, because by this time I'd managed to build up a few contacts across, and I think they were okay. They didn't mind telling me stuff because they knew I was on the Isle of Man, so it's not like I was on their patch.
Yeah,
And I wasn't being leaky. I wasn't just shouting from the rooftops about what I knew. So it was getting a little bit frustrating in that I actually had info, but what I didn't have was the machines. Because we had a fairly limited, it's not like, you can go around, see it's a pretty small place. It's not like city centre Manchester or something like that. So it was good in some ways. It wasn't so good in others, in that there was definitely less competition round here, I think. There were other players around. There was a couple of other people around here that were known to be going around doing the machines, but I had them to myself to a decent extent, and they weren't good on rechips until like I say, sometime around the £25 era, they started getting good on rechips. The other thing it was quite good for here is that you didn't really get much in the way of trouble or much in the way of hassle.
Yeah, because that can be a thing too.
Yeah, like in my own town here, it was just like, I'm the fruit machine guy. You go into the same pubs all the time. It's the same staff in there, and generally speaking, the staff weren't into the machines as well. There were a couple of pubs where the staff were into the machines, and they're never pleased to see you when they see you coming if the staff are into the machines. But generally speaking, I didn't get much in the way of trouble. And I had a decent run at them, largely to myself. So I think on balance, I'd probably prefer, because I've heard some pretty bad stories from across where if you go into the wrong pub at the wrong time, you can find yourself in a bit of bother if you're doing the machines. And I never had that here.
Oh, definitely. I mean, some people, if someone's just done a whole load of money in it and then you go on after them, they see it as their money. And as you say, bar staff, sometimes they love the machine and they think it's a perk of the job watching it, so they can take the money out afterwards after everyone's lost in it. So then somebody comes in and wins, they're not liking it. I can remember doing stuff like going into a pub on a different day of the week, so there's different staff on, and then if you're playing with a friend, get the friend to go in instead, and way they only ever see you once over like a 3-week period. So you might have already been in like 10 times, but they've only seen you twice in a month. This kind of thing. So yeah, it can happen, certainly. I think people, as the internet comes on, people begin to get wiser and realise, there are people out there trying to make money, and if you're even a little bit clever, you can tilt it in your favour a little bit.
So I'd say it wasn't. It's hard to say because I don't know exactly what it was like in the UK at the time because I was here, but I heard a few stories from across. And, people were just like lining up to do pie factories, and then they were just on their arse all the time, that kind of thing. So
I experienced some of that. It's, you're putting £35 in before it'll even begin to think about going past £2, and it's just chasing pro, so to say, or semi-pro or whatever. And those things must have been horrendous to play in between, because it's not giving you anything over £2 for.
I've played around with it in the emulator quite a bit, because you can do it in the emulator, and the way it just blocks they can block for if you knock down the percentage to like pub percentages, like 76%, they can block for, like you say, 35 quid at £2, and you're not making money on that, because what I found with the pie factories is the more casual play they got, the more they could go on, because your first jackpot, the first jackpot wouldn't repeat, but your sort of pie streak that you could get after, that seems to be the one where it would store the extra value.
Bake it, burn it.
I had some go pretty big on the £25 jackpot. I had a couple that would do like 75s, that kind of thing, and they were still ready to go even on the £25 jackpot. But I remember them chipping them all up. I went down my local pub one day to do it. I think it was a 6-shooter was one of the clones. And it had been chipped it like since the last time I'd been in there. I was waiting for it to happen. I knew it was coming, but it didn't do the invincible after. I was like, okay, they chipped this. But I thought I'd done pretty well out of them, because people have been lamenting the state of them across for a while. So
I think if memory serves, the rechips said cash in the LED in the tracked mode, whereas the unchipped ones just had the numbers, 0000 or something.
Right.
I'm sure the rechips said cash, so you could tell if it was chipped without even playing it.
Okay.
I'm sure someone will correct me on that if that's wrong, but that rings a bell. I'm getting all these memories coming back. That rings a bell on Pie Factories, and as you say, there was a load of other Vivids which you could do as well.
Yeah, there was Giant Gems was another one of the pretty much straight clones, but then you had the same Cliffhanger was one, and there was which was not clone, but the basic principle applied, and there was
Quick on the draw, Card Shark.
That's right, and you had there was the fishing one as well that I can't remember the name of. I think there was a clone Cliffhanger.
Yeah, there was like Billy Big Bass or something. Yeah,
I can't remember the name of that one. But...
Yeah, there was something fishing thing as well, and I can just about a circular kind of board in the middle and stuff, and I can just about remember those. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was all right. I mean, just one other thing on that question where you're saying if it was a help or a hindrance, I do remember if you fast forward a bit, there was, because the operators over here, they've always been cheap asses. You very rarely get shiny new machines. Like, machines will turn up on site here and they've clearly had the shit kicked out of them on site in the UK. I think they just buy them cheap off eBay or something. But it can work. It can work in your favour, because back in I don't know, about 2013, 2014. There was just like within the space of a few weeks, like nearly every single machine round here got swapped out for a red. I think it was because they got fed up with reds across, because they were just getting battered and forced all the time. So we had a load of reds turn up on the £70 jackpot, and quite a few flickers and flicker clones as well.
This is after my era, the flickers and stuff stopped by this time.
Yeah, that was the £70 jackpot, and quite a few of them turned up. And again, I sort of had them semi to myself for quite a while as well. And I do remember, like, over on the Jackpotty forums, people were saying like all their reds were disappearing and that kind of thing, and their flickers was. I think they all turned up here, because everywhere you see, like every pub seemed to have like a red in it, and you basically did them all in pretty much the same way. So yeah, that was pretty good for a while too.
I can just about remember reds. There being a sort of influx of red gaming near the end. I'd kind of stopped after £25. I'd never even played a £35 machine. Right. I'd already stopped by that time. I know on your channel you've got quite a lot of methods up for machines I just never even played. Top 35, 70s, flickers, Alien, all sorts of things like this. This is our Star Wars one as well, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah. So when emulation wise, I didn't even know fruit machine emulation was a thing until just a few years back, really. But you were sort of into it pretty early, were you not?
Yeah, very early, back in 2001.
As early as that?
Yeah, I mean, the guy that wrote it, he'd started earlier than that. I think he started in 97. He wrote the very first version. But he was a very sort of he's actually very sadly he's died now. He died back in 2020.
Yeah, I can remember.
The guy
Chris, was that his name?
Chris Wren, yeah, or Wizard as we all call him. He died in 2020, but he'd been developing the emulator since 1997, and as I understand it, he started writing it thinking that he was going to work out the machines and find a way to beat them. But once he started emulating them, he realised that there was more complexity going on than he thought there might be. But he carried on writing the emulator and thought, well, okay, maybe I can turn this into like a commercial proposition. I've spent all this time writing it, so maybe I can sell it. So he was punting it out on some of those same fruit machine mailing lists, on the Usenet mailing list that I was talking about before, where I found out about the CMA. And he just posted one day saying, oh, it was really, really low key. Like, he didn't like to blow his own trumpet. And it just said, oh, hi, everyone. Just to let you know, I'm still working on my MPU34 emulator. It lets you play a few fruit machines on your PC. You can download a demo version from here. And it was just like a link. Do you remember back in the day, you'd always get like 10 meg of web space on your own little, on your ISP that you
had?
So it's like, yeah, it's just a little, it was a little zip file and it was so low key and so kind of undramatic. And I also thought it'll just be like a little bit of a scam, like all these simulators that were doing the rounds at the time. But since there was a direct link there, I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. I'll download it. And fired it up, got it running on my PC, and there was like there were two layouts. There was Super Blackjack Club by Barcrest,
yep,
and Alphabet by Barcrest, the AWP by Barcrest. So I loaded up Super Blackjack Club because I remembered that from a snooker club that I'd used to work in the 90s, and it was in line of view of the bar, so I would spend all night, every night, watching people play it. And loaded it up, and the layouts back then, they don't look, like now on the emulator, and they look like the real machine because you've got like the real machine graphics and all that.
Oh yeah, they look just like the real thing.
Yeah, back then that wasn't even a thing. It didn't exist at all. They were all just like what we call classic style.
Classic layouts.
Yeah, with the basic geometric shapes. There was no fading lamps. There was no smooth reels or anything like that. But the emulation was still there. The emulation was still spot on. So right. I loaded it up, and it came up, and I thought, well, that actually looks like a reasonable... Because I had in my head what the real machine was like. That actually looks like a reasonable representation of the real machine. And I think you got like 40 credits. He put 40 credits in, but he disabled the put a pound in button. You couldn't put any money in it.
Okay, this is there. Now I want to play more. Yeah.
So it was like, this is your freebie demo version. So I think it had 40 credits or 20. It wasn't much. You couldn't play much through it. And I just started playing it, and like I pressed the start button, clicked on the start button, and the reels, and it played like the right sounds as well as the reels were stopping. And then I got nudges, and the nudge music kicked in, and then I got the 3 cards for the feature. And I was playing, I thought, hang on a minute, is this actually an emulator? Is this a real emulator? Has someone written an emulator? And the penny kind of dropped for me that I was playing an emulator and not a simulator. So I couldn't buy the full thing off him fast enough. Once the penny had dropped for me that this was an emulator, I emailed him back. I said, "Yo, Chris, that Futurama meme, shut up and take my money."
Yeah.
It's like, and I think from memory, he was charging 50 quid. If you paid 50 quid, you got the emulator, and I think there was 39 layouts at the time. And they were all Barcrest MPU3 or MPU4 machines, because they were the only 2 techs it emulated at the time. And I think if you paid 100 quid, you got the version that had the design tools in it as well, so you could try and make your own layouts if you had the ROMs. So I just paid 50 quid for the full version. And that was before the days of broadband internet, so it was a CD in the post job.
Oh, right, okay, yeah.
Sent me. He did email me, because the layouts were coming in at about, I don't know, 3 or 4 megabytes, which is nothing by today's standards. But on a dial-up,
but that's a while on the 56K.
On a dial-up modem. So yeah, he emailed me a couple of others over to tide me over. But then the CD arrived that had like 39 machines on it to play, and I just lost myself in it for days and days and days and days, just playing emulated fruit machines on my PC. So yeah, that was back in 2001.
Right, that is quite a while back, because I mean, as I said, I only really discovered it a few years ago, so the roots go a fair way back. And I mean, what it's turned into today is, I imagine, like nothing like what it was then. Whole community and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it pretty much emulates everything now. Any major tech used by any manufacturer. Even going back, I don't know if you know this, but it now goes back to old electromechanical machines, even before they had like a processor in them. He actually, because Chris himself, he preferred more the old machines. He did put the more modern techs in, but what he liked with it were the older techs. But if you go back to the sort of mid 1970s up to the late 70s, the machines were electromechanical. They weren't even CPU controlled, and he's written sort of code that emulates the mechanical old electromechanical machine. So you've got now, it covers machines from like 1977, 1978 right the way through to, you've got Scorpion 5 is probably the most modern tech on there, which was being used by, obviously, Betcom were using that, BFM were using it. So you've got right the way through to £100 jackpot machines on the Scorpion 5 tech, with just about everything in between, including stuff like the May game machines that have got the screen in your screenplay.
Right, yes, you're saying some names, Scorpion, MPU. I've heard all this, but I mean, I'm not sure it means, it doesn't mean as much to me as it does to you, but yeah, I get
Well,
different
that's
techs, different machines,
yeah.
yeah.
It's just the text. Different manufacturers use different technologies which they a lot of this stuff was kind of developed in house by Barcrest and BFM and Mega, and a lot of them would use their own technologies over the years. So the emulator's gone from it just started using Barcrest tech basically, which was the older one was MPU 3. Which was be like your razzle dazzle era, that kind of thing.
Right.
Going through to MPU4, which was a slightly more modern one. But by the time Chris passed in 2020, he pretty much got everything in there. There's just a couple of the most modern techs that weren't in there working. But I mean, you could argue that fruit machines had died as something that was an entertaining prospect
Yeah.
before the £70 era. So you can say in a way that the emulator pretty much preserves the entire history of UK fruit machines. It's that good now. If there's a machine that you can remember from the year 1980 to the year 2015, there's a pretty good chance it's either emulated, or if you can get a hold of the ROMs, it can be emulated and you'll be able to play it again.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, this is part of the reason why I do this. There's no real history books on fruit machines. I kind of see it as like a sort of little culture thing that's kind of almost been and gone, and it's not coming back. And I mean, if no one tells the tales of it, it's going to be lost forever, so to say.
Yeah, I mean, the fruit machine industry itself has got absolutely no interest in preserving its own history. It's not just fruit machines. We're seeing this now across the video game industry is another one famously that is just not interested in preserving its past. And if it weren't for the fact that we've got the emulator, and then us increasingly old farts now who can still remember playing the things, they are I think they would just be lost to the sands of time, because here now in the year 2023 you've got the odd kind of retro arcade, which is great. You've got places like Mr. P's, which is still actually is
Yeah.
doing a job of preserving physical fruit machines that you can go and play. But if you go out to places like Blackpool now, the arcades there, you won't find fruit machines there. They're not preserved anywhere. The companies themselves haven't maintained any kind of archive of them, and they're not like books or films. If you've got a book, you've got a copy of a book. If you've got a DVD or a copy of a movie, then that is preserved. But for things like fruit machines, they are just going to be lost to history completely. So I think you with your channel, me with mine, there's a couple of others out there, and of course the emulation scene. That is now really the only record that we've got to a great extent that these things even existed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to sound like I'm doing some kind of important history or something here, but I mean, has been a part of our culture in a sense. I mean, the bandit, the one-armed bandit, the puggy, the fruit machine, and the pub and all that. I mean, that was like you watch any kind of sitcom on TV. They've always got a fruit machine in there. Why? Because it's part and parcel of a pub. You have a fruit machine in there, and I can remember many more arcades. But all shut down now just because there's not so much interest now. Once video games in your home got to be so good, I mean, I've done a video on this before, why are you going to bother spending money in an arcade when you can play something at home that's better? It's just, it had its day, and so did fruit machines. I mean, if you want to recreate the experience, you got like smoke and urinate everywhere, but I mean, I look on it fondly in a way, but where else is it being recorded? I don't think anywhere else.
No, I don't think it is, and that's part of it. And like you were saying there, I know we've got a thread over at Desert Island Fruits. I think there's been a similar one at Jack Potty as well, which is I don't know. Maybe you do the same thing. Whenever I'm watching like a TV program or a British film from like the 80s or the 90s, my eyes constantly looking around for the fruit machine, because there'll be a fruit machine in shop somewhere.
Yep. I do it. Yeah, I do it.
I'm like scarily. It's sometimes it's like, oh my god, how nerdy are you? Because sometimes all I need is like one sweep of the lights for like an out of focus fruit machine in the background, and I like, oh, that's such and such, or that's such and such, because it's just burned into my brain as to what fruit. But that's how sort of ubiquitous they were. I mean, I don't know exactly how old you are, but I mean, I'm 50 next year, so I'm cracking on a bit. So
wow. You're older than me, yeah.
So growing up in the 80s and 90s, they were just. It's hard to imagine now. Like to a teenager now, it probably wouldn't make any sense. One is just how many pubs there were then. That was the main thing. There were just so many pubs. But fruit machines were just everywhere. Like if you went into just like a little Greasy Spoon cafe in the sort of mid to late 80s, there'd be a fruit machine or two in there.
Chippies and everything.
Train stations, chip shops, taxi
places,
wherever pretty much wherever they could find room for a fruit machine, that they would, swimming baths, all that sort of thing. So
bowling alleys, everything.
Yeah, they were absolutely everywhere, and now they're just not. Which I've got to say, I'm not entirely sure is necessarily a bad thing in many regards, because there's a conversation you can have. And should an addictive form of gambling be that readily available with no checks or balances? So I wouldn't get too misty-eyed about them in that regard, but I think it is good that they're being preserved. I think emulation is the main thing. Emulation, because the thing with the emulation collection as well is you can get it, it's on your PC, you own it, and nobody can take it off you, basically. As long as you can find a version of Windows for it to run on, you can play the emulator and you can play these old machines, and channels like yours, maybe in our own little way, like I say, not trying to blow our own trumpet, but just something that's out there for people who remember these things. If there's something that they want to watch, or find a method on an old machine or something like that, little bit of an old guy talking about it, then it is a way of preserving something that was quite a big part of like the UK sort of social scene for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Also things, I mean, you talked about video games and stuff too. I mean, I've got lots of memories of playing arcade machines. Again, they were everywhere in chip shops and everywhere. And then, I mean, you do get the odd place sort of retro arcade thing now and then, but it's not like what it was. I mean, I really enjoy that too, the kind of nostalgia of it. And it was kind of like an interesting and exciting time for computers, because every year something would come out which was like miles better than the previous, going from like Spectrums, right all the way through. But then by the, I don't know, late 90s, 2000s, it was all sort of coming to an end, because the computers were just getting better than the arcades. And it's sort of nowadays, I mean, how do fruit machines feature for you these days? Do you play them at all? Are they any part of your life?
Not well. For starters, we haven't really got any on the Isle of Man.
Yeah, that's true. You need to have some to play.
So it was a little bit unusual on the Isle of Man, in that we had different laws around the randoms. So the random 500s have been legal in pubs here for a long time. And around the
in a pub.
From the 25 to 35 pound era, the old fashioned or the traditional fruit machines started to fall out of favour, and they started getting random 500 pounders in the pubs instead.
Well, that's pretty.
So
that's mad, because I was going to say, I mean, you said it's no bad thing. Maybe fruit machines aren't about and all the rest of it. In their current form, I tend to agree. It's a lot different from sticking like 50p from the change from your round in and hoping for the best. These days, I mean, you need like 10, 20 pounds to even have a sniff of anything. It's just completely different.
Yeah, so there's basically around here now, I'm not actually sure there is a single traditional fruit machine left on the Isle of Man now. It was a fairly slow process, but it started in earnest in the sort of £35 era.
Right.
And then in the £70 era, when I think really I don't know what your experience was. Well, I know you stopped playing by then, but what I noticed around here was that in the £70 era, certainly, there were basically no what you'd call casual players left, really. It was kind of almost like just addicty type people who were playing.
Addicts only, yeah.
Honestly, because like say if you're paying, if you can put 20 quid in a machine and not even get on the board.
Yeah, it's just
Particularly if you're
nonsense, isn't
playing
it?
a machine that's been done. I mean, and I've got a whole. I was part of the problem in that regard. Like we had a couple of Can You Dig It's around here, clone of the Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
You could leave that thing wanting, oh God, about 30, 40 quid for a board on a £70, £1 a go machine. So people just stopped playing them. And the random machines, once they started putting the random machines in the pubs, they got a lot of play. And you started seeing the people who had stopped playing traditional fruit machines would have a go on the randoms because they could just put 10 quid in or 20 quid in and have a shot at winning something. And they actually started seeing people winning decent amounts on them or winning jackpots again. So what you've got now here is there are loads and loads of machines in the pubs, but they are all. I know in my own hometown, so I still, even though I hardly ever play at all, I certainly don't go out to play. I still do that thing where you look through the windows of a pub to see what machines they've got. There are no fruit machines in my hometown. I was out in Douglas with a few mates a couple of weeks ago. The pubs that we were in there, not a single one had a fruit machine. They were all just your modern Digi units, £500
Right.
jackpot.
Yeah,
But
video screens.
which I will play if I'm out in the pub. I'll maybe put. Sometimes I don't bother at all. Sometimes I'll have a little bit of a punt, and once in a while, if I've had enough beer, I'll have a bit of a row on them. But on the knowledge that I'm just playing a random game with a 90%
Yeah.
payout. But what I also found the last time I was across is that there are no fruit machines in pubs across now that I could see. It's just all digi units. That it just all seemed to be
Yeah.
mostly it just seemed to be blueprint cabs.
Yeah, I don't like that as much. I don't know if it's just nostalgia or what, but it just doesn't seem as appealing, like even aesthetically somehow.
Well, there's nothing going on. That's the main thing. Is you're pretty much just pressing the start button and seeing what it does.
Yeah, there's no decision. There's no decision. It's
There's
like
no
nudge,
real
hold. Yeah.
there's no real interaction. Uh, so yeah, I mean, I don't. First of all, there's no fruit machines left to play here anyway. But to be honest with you, I'd kind of stopped playing.
Sure.
I stopped going out, even when we had a couple of machines locally that I still could win on. We had a Betcom here, a Swing My Axe that was on site forever and ever and ever. And I genuinely just couldn't be bothered to go into the pub to play it because I've just sort of fallen out with it. So I very, very rarely play now at all. If I'm out, I might have a little bit of a punt, but that's about it, really.
Yeah, recreational use only. I think that's probably not a bad thing. As I mean, any creativity in machines is long since gone. Any element of fun for the casual player, I think, is long since gone. You have to put in far too much money to even have anything happen. And I mean, as we discussed before, it's sort of just it's a bygone era. And yeah, I mean, no bad thing in a sense
No,
either. As
I'd,
I
I'd
certainly don't
rather
want to.
I'd rather play them in the emulator, to be honest. I'd rather, because that's where you can still play them. And you
Yeah,
might say, well, there's no real money at stake, but I sometimes just give myself like a pretend 10 quid, like, oh, you've got a tenner, see how much you can win off a tenner, something
yeah,
like that. And I don't know
yeah.
if you've seen it. Have you seen that arcade simulator thing that there's a guy called
Don't
John
think so.
Parker wrote?
I don't
If
think so.
if you haven't seen it, it's like a proper 3D rendered arcade that you can walk around, and it's got a load of machines in
Oh,
it.
wait a minute. This sounds kind of familiar now. Yeah.
It's really, really good. It's this one guy who kind of did the whole thing, and what he's done, like god level genius. I have no full. He has explained how he's done it, and I still don't fully understand it. But he's somehow managed to hook it into the emulator, so you can walk around this arcade, and you see a machine that you want to. You can walk up to it, press enter on your keyboard, and it fires up the emulator in that machine, and you can like play it in the arcade.
Wow, that's pretty
And
cool. Yeah.
there's loads of different machines in there, and it works properly like the emulator does in that it saves out where it's up to when you quit out, so it
Yep.
remembers if it's streaked or if it's due to pay and all that kind of thing. So And he's even put like that horrible carpet that you always found.
Oh yeah. Fags stubbed out.
As soon as you see it, you'll see it like that is an arcade carpet. The second
standard arcade carpet is probably the cheapest thing you can get, because they know there's drinks being spilled on.
Yeah, if you haven't seen it, there are videos on my channel about it. If you just search for Arcade Simulator on my channel, it's all free of charge as well.
Cool. Okay, always good.
He's not charging a penny for it. You can download it all for free, and you can actually have this arcade on your computer that you can walk around and play machines. It's really, really good.
Ultimately, I think that's probably the best way to experience these things nowadays. The future of fruit machines, I don't see it having one particularly. It's just a relic of the past. So, okay, I'm going to stop it there for the moment. It was great to talk to you, Degsy. I'm sure we may chat again in the future. Planning on getting more people on, and I will have you back at some point. And there's all these kinds of connections. You mentioned Chris, the previous person I was chatting to. You'll maybe remember you as someone that you knew, and I've got other people you'll probably have heard of and know, and there's all these, there's probably, what's that thing, 6 degrees of separation. I bet everyone probably knows everyone through someone. It's such a kind of small niche kind of interest.
Yeah, nice to have the conversation. Cheers, dude.
Great. Okay, catch you later.
Okay, thanks, fella. See you now.